He kicked me out for his mistress, calling me old and useless. 18 years later, he sat across from me in my boardroom, begging for a deal he couldn't afford to refuse. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. It was August 2006 when Richard put my life in 2 suitcases and left them on the front porch. I came home from the grocery store to find the locks changed and a note taped to the door. Vanessa and I are starting fresh. You need to do the same. No explanation, no apology. Just my clothes, some photos, and 22 years of marriage sitting on the concrete like garbage waiting for pickup. I was 44. I had a degree in accounting I hadn't used in 2 decades, $847 in my personal checking account, and a son who stopped answering my calls the day his father told him I was making things difficult. I found a studio apartment in Somerville for $950 a month. It had brown carpet, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a bathroom where the shower leaked onto the floor every time I used it. I got a job doing bookkeeping for a small consulting firm, $42,000 a year, no benefits. I bought my clothes at TJ Maxx and my groceries at Dollar Tree. I learned to make a rotisserie chicken last 5 days. At night, I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to understand what I'd done wrong. I'd raised our son. I'd kept the house. I'd supported Richard through 2 failed business ventures and a drinking problem he swore he'd beaten. And he'd looked at me one morning and decided I wasn't worth keeping. The word he'd used, useless, sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't fight the divorce. I didn't have the money for a lawyer. And Richard's attorney made it clear that contesting anything would mean years of litigation I couldn't afford. I got nothing. No alimony, no share of the house, no retirement. Richard's company, Parker Industries, a mid-sized supply chain firm he'd inherited from his father, was underwater, according to his financial disclosures. I didn't believe it, but I had no way to prove otherwise. Daniel, our son, came to see me exactly once. He was 18, about to start college at BU on his father's dime. He sat in my apartment for 11 minutes, looked around at the peeling wallpaper and the futon I'd bought off Craigslist, and said, "Dad thinks it's better if we take some space." "Space from what?" I asked. "From this." He gestured vaguely at the apartment, at me, at the life I was trying to build from nothing. It's hard for him right now. Vanessa's trying to make things work, and you calling all the time, showing up. It's making it harder. "I'm your mother," I said. "I know," he stood up. "I just think maybe we all need time to adjust." He didn't visit again. Didn't call. Didn't answer when I reached out. I stopped trying after a year. I worked. That's what I did. 60, 70 hours a week. I took every extra project my boss offered, learned Excel inside and out, taught myself financial modeling on YouTube. I got promoted to senior accountant, then accounting manager. After 3 years, I was recruited by a private equity firm in Boston, $98,000 a year plus bonuses. I moved to a 1-bedroom in Cambridge, bought furniture that wasn't secondhand, started contributing to a 401k. I didn't date, didn't make friends, didn't do anything that wasn't work or sleep, or the slow, deliberate construction of a life that looked nothing like the one Richard had thrown away. At 35, the PE firm made me a partner. At 40, I launched my own investment fund with 2 former colleagues. We focused on distressed assets, companies on the edge of failure that we could buy cheap, turn around, and sell for profit. I was good at it. Better than good. I understood failure intimately. I knew what it looked like, how it smelled, the exact moment when a drowning company realized it had no choice but to accept the hand pulling it under. By 50, I had $4.3 million in assets. By 60, it was $15 million. I bought a condo in Back Bay with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Charles River. I drove a Tesla. I wore suits that cost more than a month's rent in that Somerville studio. I had an assistant, a personal trainer, a financial advisor who managed my portfolio like it was his religion. I thought about Richard sometimes. Wondered if he was still with Vanessa, if his company had recovered, if he ever thought about the woman he'd called useless. But I didn't look him up, didn't Google him, didn't drive past the house that used to be mine. I didn't need to. I'd already won. Then, on a Tuesday in March 2024, my COO Marcus walked into my office with a folder. "You're going to want to see this," he said. Inside was a pitch deck for a potential acquisition. Parker Industries, supply chain logistics, based in Boston, $12 million in annual revenue, currently seeking a capital infusion to avoid bankruptcy. The owner, Richard Parker, was offering a minority stake in exchange for $3 million in operational oversight. I stared at the name for a long time. "You know him?" Marcus asked. "I used to," I said. Marcus waited. He was 38, smart, ruthlessly efficient, and one of the few people I trusted. He knew better than to push. "What do you think?" I asked finally. "Honestly, it's a mess. Over-leveraged, outdated systems, bleeding clients. But the bones are good. If someone came in and cleaned house, it could be worth $20 million in 3 years. And if no one comes in, they'll be insolvent by June." I closed the folder. Set up a meeting. "I want to hear his pitch in person." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. in my office. I had Marcus send the details to Richard's attorney with a note. "Ms. Parker will hear your proposal, but she has limited time. Be prepared." I didn't tell Marcus that Richard was my ex-husband. Didn't tell him about the suitcases or the word useless or the 18 years I'd spent building a life out of nothing. I just worked. On Wednesday night, I stayed late at the office, reviewing Parker Industries' financials. They were worse than Marcus had suggested. Richard had taken on debt to expand into new markets, but the expansion had failed. His client base was shrinking. His staff was underpaid and demoralized. He'd been propping the company up with personal loans, and now those loans were coming due. He was desperate, and desperation made people easy to control. I went home, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably awake too, rehearsing his pitch, trying to figure out how to convince a stranger to save him. He had no idea the stranger was me. I smiled. Tomorrow he would walk into my office, sit in the chair across from my desk and ask me for help. And I would look him in the eye and decide whether mercy or revenge tasted sweeter. I was 62 years old. I was worth $15 million. I was nobody's useless ex-wife. And Richard Parker was about to find out exactly what I'd become. Richard didn't recognize me at first. He walked into my office at 2:03 p.m., flanked by a lawyer in an ill-fitting suit and a younger man I assumed was his operations manager. Richard looked older than I'd imagined. Gray hair thinning at the crown, a slight stoop to his shoulders, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 18 years ago. He wore a navy blazer that had seen better days and carried a leather portfolio that was scuffed at the corners. He was nervous. I could see it in the way he gripped the portfolio, the way his eyes darted around the room, taking in the view, the furniture, the framed deals on the wall. He was cataloging wealth, calculating power, trying to figure out who he was dealing with. "Parker," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us." I stood slowly, let him wait a beat too long, then shook his hand. His palm was damp. "Parker," I said, "please sit." They sat. I stayed standing for a moment, positioned by the window with the afternoon light behind me. I wanted him off balance. Wanted him squinting into the sun, uncertain. When I finally sat, I folded my hands on the desk and looked at him directly. That's when it happened. I saw the flicker of recognition, confusion first, then disbelief, then something close to horror. "Evelyn," he said. I didn't smile. "Hello, Richard." The lawyer and the operations manager exchanged glances. Richard's face went pale. I didn't. He stopped. Started again. I didn't know you were... the name Parker, I thought it was a coincidence. It's my name, I said calmly. I never changed it back after the divorce. It seemed easier to keep it. His mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd walked into the wrong room. I see you brought a proposal, I said, nodding at the portfolio. Why don't you walk me through it? Richard stared at me. The lawyer cleared his throat and leaned forward. Parker, if there's a conflict of interest here... There isn't, I said. Parker and I were married a long time ago. We haven't spoken in 18 years. This is a business meeting. If he'd like to proceed, I'm happy to listen. I looked at Richard. Unless you'd prefer to leave? He swallowed. No, I'd like to proceed. Good, I said. Then let's hear it. The pitch was bad. Worse than I'd expected. Richard stumbled through the slides, his voice unsteady, his hands shaking slightly as he turned pages. The operations manager tried to help, interjecting with optimistic projections and market analysis, but it was clear they were grasping. Parker Industries was dying. They needed $3 million immediately to cover debt payments and payroll. In exchange, they were offering 30% equity and a seat on the board. When Richard finished, I sat back in my chair. 30%, I said. For $3 million, in a company that's 3 months from insolvency. We have a path to profitability, the operations manager started. I held up a hand. Your projections assume you'll retain 90% of your current clients and acquire 15 new contracts in the next year. But you've lost 6 clients in the last 8 months, and your acquisition rate over the past 2 years is 1.2 contracts per year. So unless something fundamental changes, your projections are fiction. The room went quiet. What are you proposing? Richard asked quietly. I'm not proposing anything yet, I said. I'm telling you that if you want my money, you need to be realistic about what you're offering. Right now, you're asking me to pay $3 million for a third of a sinking ship. Richard's jaw tightened. I could see the anger there, just beneath the surface, the same anger I'd seen the day he'd put my suitcases on the porch. The anger of a man who didn't like being told he'd failed. So what do you want? He said. 51%, I said. $3 million for controlling interest. I bring in my team, we restructure, and if we turn this around, you keep 49% of something valuable. If we don't, you are bankrupt anyway. That's not... He stopped, took a breath. That's my father's company. I can't just hand it over. You're not handing it over, I said. You're selling it. To me, at a price you can't afford to refuse. He stared at me. I stared back. The lawyer leaned over and whispered something to Richard. Richard shook his head. The operations manager looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Finally, Richard said, I need time to think about it. You have until Monday, I said. After that, the offer expires. I stood, signaling the meeting was over. The lawyer and operations manager stood quickly. Richard stayed seated for a moment, looking up at me. Why are you doing this? He asked. Doing what? This, the offer. You could have just said no. I picked up the portfolio from my desk and handed it to him. You came to me, Richard? I'm just deciding whether you're worth the investment. He took the portfolio. Our hands didn't touch. As they walked to the door, Richard turned back. Evelyn? Parker, I corrected. He nodded. Parker, I just want you to know, I'm sorry for how things ended. You have until Monday, I said. 2 p.m. Let me know your decision. I sat down and turned to my computer, dismissing him without another word. When they were gone, Marcus came in. That was your ex-husband, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The one who... Yes. Marcus sat down across from me. Are you sure about this? About what? Taking on his company. It's going to be complicated. Everything worth doing is complicated, I said. Marcus studied me for a moment. What are you really doing here, Evelyn? I looked at him. Marcus had worked with me for 6 years. He knew how I operated. Knew I didn't make emotional decisions. Knew every move I made was calculated for maximum return. I'm making money, I said. Parker Industries is undervalued. If we strip out the debt, modernize the systems, and retain even 70% of the client base, we can flip it for $18 million in 2 years. And the fact that it's his company? Is irrelevant, I said. Marcus didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Okay, I'll start prepping due diligence in case he says yes. He'll say yes, I said. He doesn't have a choice. Richard called on Saturday morning. I was at the gym when my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, finished my workout, showered, and drove home before I listened to the message. Evelyn, Ms. Parker, it's Richard. I've thought about your offer. I'd like to discuss terms. Can we meet? Maybe somewhere less formal? I think we need to talk. Just the two of us. I deleted the message and texted back. Monday, 2 p.m., my office. Bring your attorney and a signed acceptance of the term sheet. We'll finalize paperwork. He replied 10 minutes later. Understood. I set the phone down and poured myself a cup of coffee. Outside my window, the city stretched out in every direction. Cold, bright, indifferent. I thought about the woman I'd been 18 years ago, sitting in a studio apartment with $847 in the bank and a future that looked like nothing. She would have been terrified of this moment. She would have second-guessed, hesitated, apologized for taking up space. But I wasn't her anymore. I picked up my phone and texted Marcus. He's in. Let's move forward. Then I sat down with my coffee and watched the city wake up, and I felt absolutely nothing. The weekend passed slowly. I worked, went to the gym, had dinner alone at a bistro in the South End. I didn't think about Richard. Didn't rehearse what I'd say when he signed the papers. Didn't let myself feel anything that resembled anticipation or dread. On Sunday evening, I was reviewing financials when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, Parker Industries, personal note. I almost deleted it. Then I opened it. Evelyn, I know you said to keep this professional, and I will. But I need you to know that I never wanted things to end the way they did. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I hurt you in ways I can't take back. Vanessa left me 3 years ago. Daniel barely speaks to me. I've spent the last decade watching everything I built fall apart, and I know it's because of the choices I made. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were never the problem. I was. I'll see you Monday, Richard. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Monday came. Richard arrived alone, without the lawyer or the operations manager. He wore the same blazer, carried the same portfolio, but something about him was different, smaller, quieter, like a man who'd already accepted defeat. Where's your attorney? I asked. I sent him the signed term sheet this morning, Richard said. He'll courier over the paperwork this afternoon, I thought. I thought maybe we could talk first. I gestured to the chair. He sat. I got your email, I said. I wasn't sure if you'd read it. I did. He nodded, looked down at his hands. I meant what I said. About the mistakes. About you. Richard, I said carefully. I appreciate the sentiment. But this is a business transaction. Your apologies don't change the terms. I know. He looked up at me. I just needed to say it. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and construction, and the thousand small sounds of people living their lives. Inside, it was just the two of us and 18 years of unspoken things. Can I ask you something? Richard said. Go ahead. Why did you agree to this? You could have said no. You could have let me fail. Why didn't you? I considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. A mix of curiosity, pragmatism, and something darker I didn't want to name. So I gave him the simple version. Because it's a good deal, I said. Your company has value. I can extract it. That's all? That's all. He nodded slowly, but I could see he didn't believe me. Maybe he knew me better than I thought. Or maybe he just wanted to believe there was still something between us, some thread of the past that hadn't been completely severed. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we restructure," I said. "Marcus will handle the operational side. We'll bring in new management, renegotiate contracts, cut overhead. You'll stay on as a consultant, but you won't have decision-making authority. I'm being pushed out of my own company. You're being saved from bankruptcy," I corrected. "There's a difference." He flinched. I didn't soften it. "You'll still own 49%, I continued. "If we turn this around, you'll walk away with more than you have now. But you don't get to run it anymore. That's the deal." Richard looked at me for a long moment. Then he stood, extended his hand. "Thank you," he said. "I know you didn't have to do this." I shook his hand. It was firmer this time, less desperate. "I'll have Marcus send over the transition timeline. We'll start next week." He nodded and walked to the door. Then he stopped, turned back. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm proud of you, of what you've built. You deserved better than what I gave you." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. When he left, I sat alone in my office and felt the weight of what I'd just done settle over me. I'd bought Richard's company. I'd taken control of the thing his father had built, the thing he'd valued more than our marriage, more than me. And I'd done it legally, professionally, without raising my voice or breaking a single rule. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt heavy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the email Richard had sent, about the line, "Daniel barely speaks to me." I hadn't seen my son in 18 years, hadn't heard his voice, didn't know what he looked like now, didn't know if he was married or where he lived or what he did for work. I'd tried in the early years to reach out, but after a decade of silence, I'd stopped. It was easier to pretend he didn't exist than to carry the weight of his absence every day. But now I wondered. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and searched for him, Daniel Parker, Boston. There were dozens of results. LinkedIn profiles, Facebook pages, mentions in news articles. I scrolled through them until I found one that looked right. Daniel R. Parker, 35, senior consultant at a firm in New York. His profile picture showed a man with Richard's build and my eyes. He was smiling, standing in front of an office building, looking successful and happy and completely unreachable. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and went back to bed. The next morning, Marcus came into my office with an update. "Richard's attorney sent over the signed paperwork," he said. "It's official. You own 51% of Parker Industries." "Good," I said. "Start the transition. I want a full operational audit by end of week." Marcus hesitated. "There's something else." "What?" "I was going through Richard's emails. He gave us access as part of the deal, and I found something. A thread from 2008. You should read it." He handed me a printout. It was an email exchange between Richard and Daniel, dated October 2008, 2 years after the divorce. "Dad, I don't think I can keep doing this. Every time Mom calls, I feel like I'm lying to her. She asks how I'm doing, and I tell her I'm fine, and I can hear in her voice that she's not. I know you said it's better this way, but I don't think it is. I think we made a mistake." "Daniel." Richard's response was short. "Daniel, I know this is hard, but your mother made her choices and we made ours. Sometimes families break, and that's no one's fault. You need to focus on school and your future. Let me worry about the rest." "Dad." I read it 3 times. "There are more," Marcus said quietly. "From 2009, 2010, 2012. Daniel kept trying. Richard kept shutting him down. I set the printout on my desk and looked out the window. The city blurred. "Does Richard know you found these?" I asked. "Don't tell him." Marcus nodded and left. I sat alone with the printout for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, navigated to LinkedIn, and typed out a message to Daniel Parker. "Daniel, you don't know me, but my name is Evelyn Parker. I'm your mother. I don't expect you to respond to this, and I won't contact you again if you'd prefer I didn't. But I wanted you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Mom! I read it 10 times. Then I deleted it. Then I wrote it again, and this time I hit send before I could change my mind. I met Daniel at a small coffee shop in Cambridge 2 days later. He looked like his father used to, before bitterness carved lines into Richard's face, tall brown hair starting to gray at the temples, the same careful way of folding his hands on the table. But his eyes were mine, hazel, watchful, guarded. "Thank you for coming," I said. He nodded slowly. "I didn't know if I should. I didn't know if you'd want to see me after all this time." "You were 18, I said. "You were a kid who loved his father." "I was a coward," he said quietly. "I should have called. Should have checked on you. I knew what he did was wrong, but I went along with it. Went to college, got my job, pretended it was all normal." I watched him for a moment. There was real regret there, real shame. It wasn't the easy apology of someone trying to clear their conscience. It was the slow bleeding guilt of someone who'd lived with their failure for years. "You're here now," I said. We talked for an hour. Carefully at first, then less so. He told me about his work at a consulting firm in New York, about his fiancée Sarah, about the small apartment they were saving to leave for something bigger. He asked about my company, about Boston, about the years he'd missed. I gave him the edited version, the one that didn't include the studio apartment or the Dollar Tree dinners or the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if my own son hated me. When we parted, he hugged me. It was brief, awkward, but real. "Can we do this again?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." I drove back to my condo with something unfamiliar sitting in my chest. Not quite hope, not quite peace, but something close to both. The deal with Richard closed the following week. Marcus handled most of the paperwork, but I insisted on being present for the final signing. Richard looked worse than he had at our last meeting. His suit rumpled, his hands shaking slightly as he signed page after page. Vanessa wasn't there. According to Marcus, she'd moved out 3 weeks earlier, taking half the furniture and the BMW Richard had bought her in 2007. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter that said only, "I can't do this anymore." Karma, I thought, watching Richard initial a disclosure form, quiet, efficient, inevitable. When the signing was done, I walked him out to the parking lot. He moved slowly, like a man who'd aged a decade in a month. "Thank you," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I know you didn't have to do this." "No," I agreed. "I didn't." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw something that might have been recognition, not of who I was now, but of what he'd thrown away. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said that day. For all of it." I could have told him it was fine. Could have offered forgiveness, closure, the clean ending he clearly wanted. But I thought of the suitcases on the porch, of the word useless, of 18 years of silence. "I know you are," I said. And I walked away. Marcus called me that evening. "We need to talk about the Parker acquisition," he said. "There's something you should see." I met him at the office. He had a folder spread across the conference table. Financial records, emails, contracts. He pointed to a series of transactions from 2019 to 2022. "Richard took out personal loans against the company," Marcus said. $300,000 in 2019, another $200 in 2021, and $150 in 2022. He used corporate assets as collateral without board approval. "That's illegal," I said. "Yes," Marcus said. "It is." I studied the documents. The loans had been used for personal expenses, a beach house in Maine, a boat, Vanessa's credit cards. Richard had been siphoning money from his own company for years, and when the market turned and the loans came due, he'd had nothing left to cover them. "If this comes to light, he could face criminal charges," Marcus said carefully. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. I sat down. The numbers blurred in front of me. Richard hadn't just failed. He'd stolen, lied, gutted his own company to pay for a life he couldn't afford. And now I owned 51% of the wreckage. Does he know we found this? I asked. I don't think so, Marcus said. It was buried pretty deep. I thought of Richard in the parking lot, his shaking hands, his hollow apology. I thought of the suitcases, the word useless, the years of silence. Keep it quiet for now, I said. But document everything. I want a full audit by the end of the month. Marcus nodded. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. Outside the window, the city glittered in the dark, cold, bright, indifferent. I thought of the woman I'd been at 44, standing on a porch with 2 suitcases and no plan. I thought of the woman I was now, sitting in a corner office with the power to destroy the man who'd destroyed me. I'm going to decide, I said. I had dinner with Daniel again the following Sunday. This time he brought Sarah, a warm, funny woman with curly red hair and an infectious laugh. We ate at a small Italian place in the North End, and for a few hours I felt like a normal person with a normal family doing a normal thing. As we were leaving, Daniel pulled me aside. Dad called me, he said. I went still. What did he say? He wanted to know if I'd talked to you. If I knew about the deal. Daniel's jaw tightened. I told him it was none of his business. What did he say? He hung up. I nodded slowly. Richard was fishing, trying to figure out what I knew, what I wanted, how much danger he was in. Let him wonder. Let him feel what it was like to stand on uncertain ground with no one to catch him. You don't owe him anything, Daniel said quietly. I know he's my father, but after what he did to you, this isn't about him, I said. Not anymore. Daniel looked at me for a long moment, then hugged me again. It was easier this time, more natural. I'm glad you're back in my life, he said. Me too, I said. And I meant it. The audit came back 3 weeks later. It was worse than Marcus had thought. Richard had taken over $800,000 from the company over 5 years. All of it classified as business expenses or consulting fees. He'd falsified records, signatures, lied to his board and his investors. I sat in my office with the report in front of me and a decision to make. I could go to the authorities. Richard would be arrested, charged, probably convicted. He'd lose everything. His reputation, his freedom, what little money he had left. It would be justice, clean and legal and final. Or I could use it. I picked up my phone and called Richard. We need to meet, I said. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. My office. There was a pause. What's this about? You'll find out tomorrow, I said, and hung up. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was panicking, trying to figure out what I knew, what I wanted, how much it would cost him. Let him panic. Let him wonder. Let him feel every second of the fear I'd felt 18 years ago when he'd put my suitcases on the porch and told me I was useless. Tomorrow I'd show him exactly how useful I'd become. Richard arrived at 10 sharp. He wore the same gray suit from the signing, but it looked worse now. Wrinkled, slightly too large, like he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. His eyes were bloodshot, and when he shook my hand, his palm was damp. Thank you for seeing me, he said. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Sit. He sat. I stayed standing, positioned by the window with the morning light behind me. It was a deliberate choice. Let him squint. Let him feel off balance. Let him wonder. I'll get straight to the point, I said. We completed a full audit of your company. Standard procedure for any acquisition. His face went pale. An audit. Yes. I picked up the folder from my desk and dropped it in front of him. You should look at page 12. He opened it with shaking hands. I watched him read, watched the color drain further from his face, watched his throat work as he swallowed, watched the precise moment he realized I had him. He stopped. Started again. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said calmly. You took $823,000 from your company over 5 years. You falsified records, forged board signatures, and lied to your investors. That's fraud, Richard, and embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. I was going to pay it back, he said quickly. I had a plan. I just needed time. You had no plan, I said. You had a mistress and a boat and a beach house you couldn't afford. So you stole from your own company until there was nothing left to steal. He looked up at me. There was panic in his eyes now, raw and undisguised. What are you going to do? I sat down across from him. That depends on you. I'll give you anything, he said. Whatever you want. Just, please, if this gets out, I'll go to prison. I'll lose everything. You've already lost everything, I said. Vanessa's gone. Your company's mine. Your reputation's hanging by a thread. I paused. But you still have your freedom. What do you want? He whispered. I leaned back in my chair. This was the moment I'd been imagining for 3 weeks. The moment when Richard Parker, who'd called me useless and put my life in 2 suitcases, sat across from me and begged. I want you to sign over your remaining 49%, I said. For $1. His eyes widened. That's worth at least $1 million, even now. It's worth what I say it's worth, I said. And right now, I'm offering you a choice. You sign, I bury the audit, and you walk away with your freedom. Or I go to the district attorney, and you spend the next 5 to 10 years in a federal prison. You can't do this, he said. But there was no strength in it, just the hollow protest of a man who knew he'd already lost. I can, I said. And I will. You taught me that, Richard. Remember? When you put my suitcases on the porch, you said I needed to learn to stand on my own. I smiled. Well, I learned. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he put his face in his hands. I'm sorry, he said, muffled. God, Evelyn, I'm so sorry. For all of it. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no pity. Just a cold, clear certainty. I don't want your apology, I said. I want your signature. He signed. When he left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. The folder sat on my desk, closed now. The evidence of Richard's crimes locked safely inside. I owned 100% of Parker Industries. I had everything I'd wanted. So why did I feel empty? I called Marcus. It's done, I said. He signed. Jesus, Marcus said. You really did it. Yes. There was a pause. Are you okay? I looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Richard was walking to his car, getting in, driving away from the life he'd destroyed. Somewhere Daniel was at work, unaware that his father had just lost everything. Somewhere, Vanessa was living in a new apartment, free of the man who'd ruined her as thoroughly as he'd ruined me. I don't know, I said honestly. I met Daniel for lunch the next day. I didn't tell him about Richard, about the audit, about the signature. I told myself it was because I didn't want to burden him. But the truth was simpler. I was ashamed, not of what I'd done to Richard. He'd earned that, but of what it had cost me. The coldness, the calculation, the part of myself I'd had to shut off in order to sit across from the man I'd once loved and strip him of everything without flinching. You seem distracted, Daniel said. Work, I said. It's been a complicated week. Dad called me again, he said. He sounded bad, worse than before. I set down my fork. What did he want? He asked if I could lend him money. Daniel's face tightened. $20,000. He said it was an emergency, that he'd pay me back in a month. What did you say? I said no. He looked at me. I asked him what happened, and he just hung up. Do you know what's going on? I could have lied. Could have shrugged, played ignorant, let Richard's collapse remain a mystery. But I was tired of lying, tired of carrying secrets, tired of being the one who absorbed everyone else's pain without complaint. He sold his company to me, I said. All of it. For almost nothing, Daniel's eyes widened. Why would he do that? Because I gave him no choice. I told him everything. The audit, the fraud, the $800,000 Richard had stolen. The choice I'd offered, sign or go to prison. The way he'd put his face in his hands and signed anyway. When I finished, Daniel was silent for a long time. I'm sorry, I said. I know he's your father. I know this is... Don't apologize, Daniel said. His voice was tight, controlled. He did this to himself. I didn't have to be so ruthless about it, I said. I could have... What? Let him get away with it? Daniel shook his head. Mom, he threw you out with nothing. He turned me against you. He stole from his own company and lied to everyone for years. You gave him more mercy than he deserved. I looked at my son, this man I barely knew, this stranger who'd somehow become the only person who truly saw me, and felt something crack open in my chest. I don't want to be the kind of person who does this, I said quietly. Who destroys people even if they deserve it. You're not, Daniel said. You're the kind of person who survives. Richard called me 2 days later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. What do you want? I said. I'm leaving Boston, he said. His voice was flat, defeated. I'm moving to Florida. My brother has a condo in Tampa. He said I could stay there for a while. Okay. I just wanted you to know. A pause. And to tell you, you were right. About all of it. I was a coward. I ruined everything good I ever had because I was too weak to appreciate it. I said nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I just wanted to say it. Goodbye, Evelyn. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Then I deleted his number. Marcus came to my office that afternoon with a bottle of champagne. We should celebrate, he said. You just pulled off the most ruthless corporate maneuver I've ever seen. You're now the sole owner of 2 companies. You've got $15 million in liquid assets, and you're officially one of the top 50 most powerful women in Boston. I don't feel powerful, I said. That's because power doesn't feel like anything, Marcus said. It just is. He poured 2 glasses. We drank in silence. Do you regret it? He asked finally. I thought about it. Thought about Richard's shaking hands, his hollow apology, the way he'd looked at me like I was a stranger. Thought about the woman I'd been 18 years ago, standing on a porch with 2 suitcases, and the woman I was now, sitting in a corner office with the power to destroy lives. No, I said. I don't. And I meant it. 3 months later, I stood in Daniel's living room in Brooklyn, holding my first grandchild. Sarah had gone into labor 2 weeks early, and Daniel had called me at 6 in the morning, his voice shaking with equal parts terror and joy. I'd driven 4 hours through rain to get there, and now here I was, grandmother to a 7-pound baby girl named Claire, with Daniel's brown hair and Sarah's green eyes and tiny perfect fingers that wrapped around mine like a promise. She's beautiful, I whispered. She has your nose, Daniel said, standing beside me. He looked exhausted, stunned, radiantly happy. Sarah says she does anyway. I looked at my son, this man who'd been lost to me for 18 years and found again in a coffee shop in Cambridge, and felt something settle into place. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not erasure of the years we'd lost. But something quieter, more durable. A foundation we could build on. Thank you for being here, he said softly. There's nowhere else I'd be, I said. I stayed in Brooklyn for a week. I helped with midnight feedings, learned to change diapers, held Claire while Sarah slept, and Daniel stumbled through the apartment like a sleepwalker. It was ordinary, exhausting, mundane, and the happiest I'd been in years. One evening, after Claire had finally fallen asleep and Sarah had retreated to the bedroom, Daniel and I sat on the couch with lukewarm coffee and the quiet relief of parents who'd survived another day. I talked to Dad, he said. I looked at him. When? Last week. He called from Florida. Daniel stared into his coffee. He wanted to know if I'd told you about the money he asked for. I said yes. What did he say? He said he understood. That he didn't blame me for choosing you. Daniel's voice was carefully neutral. He asked if you were doing okay, if you were happy. What did you tell him? I told him you were a grandmother now, that you'd driven 4 hours in the rain to be here when Claire was born, that you were the first person I called. He looked at me. I told him you were exactly where you were supposed to be. I felt my throat tighten. How did he take it? He said he was glad, that he hoped you could forgive him someday. Daniel paused. I told him that wasn't my business. We sat in silence for a moment. Somewhere in the bedroom, Claire made a small sound, not quite a cry, just the murmur of a baby dreaming. Daniel started to rise, but I put a hand on his arm. I'm not angry anymore, I said. At him, at you, at any of it. I don't know if that's forgiveness, but it's something. You earned the right to be angry, Daniel said. I know, but I'm tired of carrying it. I looked at the bedroom door, where my granddaughter slept in a bassinet I'd helped assemble that morning. I'd rather carry this. Daniel smiled, the first real, unguarded smile I'd seen from him. Yeah, me too. I went back to Boston the following week. Marcus had been managing things in my absence, and the transition back to work was smoother than I'd expected. Parker Industries was stable now, profitable, operating under new management with a new name, Beacon Holdings. We'd diversified, expanded, brought in fresh talent. The company Richard had nearly destroyed was thriving, but I found myself caring less about the numbers, the deals, the board meetings. I still showed up, still did the work, but something had shifted. The hunger that had driven me for 18 years, the need to prove I was more than the woman Richard had discarded, had quieted. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I'd already won. One afternoon in late November, I got a call from an unfamiliar Florida number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Evelyn. Richard's voice was rough, tentative. I know I have no right to call. I wanted to thank you. For what? For not destroying me completely. He paused. You could have sent me to prison. You could have told Daniel everything, turned him against me forever. You didn't. I didn't do it for you, I said. I know, but still. Thank you. I waited. There was more. I could hear it in the silence. I'm in AA now, he said finally. 90 days sober. My sponsor says I need to make amends. I know I can never undo what I did to you, but I want you to know I'm trying to be better. To be someone Daniel doesn't have to be ashamed of. I thought of the man who'd put my suitcases on the porch, who'd called me old and useless, who'd stolen from his own company to fund a life built on lies. I thought of the man sitting in my office with shaking hands, signing away everything he had left. I thought of the man on the phone now, sober and broken and trying. Good luck, Richard, I said. And I meant it. I hung up and sat for a long time, looking out at the city. It was starting to snow, light, delicate flakes that caught the afternoon sun. In a few hours, I'd drive to the airport, fly to Brooklyn, spend Thanksgiving with Daniel and Sarah and Claire. In a few weeks, I'd host the company holiday party, toast another successful year, go home to my condo alone. But I wasn't lonely. Not anymore. I'd built a life from nothing, from 2 suitcases and a studio apartment and a heart that refused to quit. I'd clawed my way to the top, taken back everything that had been stolen from me, and come out the other side with my son and my granddaughter and a future that looked nothing like the past. Richard had called me useless. He'd been wrong. On Thanksgiving, Daniel made a toast. To family, he said, raising his glass. To the people who show up when it matters. I looked around the table, at Sarah, smiling and exhausted, at Claire, asleep in her carrier, at Daniel, my son, who'd found his way back to me against all odds. I thought of the woman I'd been at 44, standing on a porch with nowhere to go. I thought of the woman I was now, sitting at a table surrounded by people who loved me. To family, I echoed. We drank. Later, after dinner, I held Claire while Sarah and Daniel cleaned up. She was awake now, staring at me with that unfocused infant gaze that seemed to see everything and nothing. "You're going to be okay," I whispered to her. "Whatever happens, whoever hurts you, whatever you lose, you're going to be okay. Because you come from a long line of women who survive." Claire yawned, unimpressed, and I laughed. Daniel came over and sat beside me. "What are you telling her?" "Secrets," I said. "Grandmother's secrets." He smiled. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," I said, and I meant it. I flew back to Boston the Sunday after Thanksgiving. My condo was quiet, clean, exactly as I'd left it. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker on one by one. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Claire misses you already. When are you coming back?" I smiled and typed back, "Soon. I love you." His reply came immediately. "Love you too, Mom." The word still felt new, fragile, precious. I'd lost 18 years of hearing it, but I had it back now. I had my son back. I had a granddaughter. I had a life I'd built with my own hands. Richard had kicked me out, calling me old and useless. He'd meant to destroy me. Instead, he'd set me free. I looked out at the city, my city, the one I'd conquered, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace!